Alrighty, fellow blacklists and makers of things that work and things that don't work. I'm about to take this, my electricity bike, for its first little old ride up and down the road. I like to think that it will go along at maybe up to 15 miles an hour. Yeah, if I'm lucky it will go that fast. But it will be at least 10 miles an hour, I'm sure. So here we go. Let's just twist the speedy needle. And there we have it. As you can tell, it's making an incredible amount of noise. I think it needs a new muffler to make it quieter. Having this little homemade stand is plenty handy. That allows me to do all my work on the bike without having to worry about it falling over or moving around. I tried to work on this before making the stand, and no, it just wasn't going to happen. So fellas and fella-esses, wish me luck, because the next part of this video will be me having a bit of a ride on this bike. Got a couple of cameras here to capture the action, and another one up here. So hopefully all will go well. Of course, if it doesn't work, I'll just quietly hide all evidence of my failed attempt. Ciao for now. didn't even explode. Sweet! Alrighty then. This bike has just come back from a ride of 1 mile in length at the princely speed of 12 miles an hour. That was as fast as I could get this little puppy to run. But I suppose that's to be expected considering the low voltage I'm running it on. It's receiving 14 volts from this 4 amp hour LiPo battery. So if I double up the voltage, perhaps I'll go twice as fast. I don't really know. I've just added a couple more cable ties with a view of putting another battery on at the same voltage in parallel with this, so it can go twice as far. As I think the limit on this 4 amp hour battery will be about 2 miles before it runs out, so I don't want to run these down too much. So that one there is responsible for powering the alternator motor using the 60 amp ESC. This fan here keeps it cool because otherwise this gets quite hot and it could be damaged, so that's a little protective measure. This 11 volt battery here is responsible for delivering current to the rotor coil in this to magnetize it and render it useful as a motor. A couple of switches over here manage that. This switch here switches that current on and off, and this one here governs how much current. So in this position it gets less current, so the motor can go faster but with less torque. And in that position, vice versa, the current goes up much higher, the motor goes slower as a result, but you get way more torque. And it seems to favour this position, as the forward position with lower current didn't really work all that well. But perhaps with elevated voltage that will be resolved. I don't really know. This little plate here is very temporary. I made this up with the help of my CNC machine to carry all this equipment, simply for the purpose of testing this to see if it even works. And to my delight, it works like a charm. It zips along very quietly, not very fast I must admit, but so quietly. Oh, it's a pleasure to ride, I must say. Control of this little fellow is achieved by way of an aircraft servo tester, simply tied to the front end of the frame here. Ideally, as I improve this, I'll make up something better and set it up here like a thumb throttle. That way I've got much more control over the whole thing. Perhaps indeed those switches for the torque setting can go there too. Mechanically speaking, the main frame that carries the prime mover is attached to the bike at 3 points. The 2 points, or 2 of those points, being at the ends of the axle, and the third point being where the hole is in the bike frame to receive a mudguard. Since modern bikes don't have mudguards, one can't really call them a finished article when they're for sale at the shop. Nonetheless, though, I've been able to take advantage of that little deficiency in order to mount the prime mover to the frame of the bike without making any modifications, without welding anything and damaging it. On top of this base frame is the motor frame. So that's attached at 4 points, so there's a bolt like this on the other side, and there's a bolt like that on the other side too. These are set up so as I can raise and lower it, thereby governing chain tension. As at the moment there is a problem with this. It's the only problem I've found so far, and that is that the chain threatens to come off. To resolve that in the long term, I've made up this slipper block, and may also make up a slipper wheel that has the slot in it too. The idea being that it runs like that and sort of steers the chain back onto the main sprocket, thereby eliminating the chance of it coming away like I suspect it will in time. So that's, I would say, is the only problem I foresee with this. To get round it at the moment, I've simply done these bolts up so the chain is really tight, but that's not really what I'd call a viable solution for the long term. Talking of solutions and changing things, taking things off, putting other things on, I can't really say for sure if this Alternator is an efficient prime mover. It works like a charm, doesn't get hot, never complains. I've got a pet rock that's like that, it never complains, although it did pee on the carpet once. Anyway, what I'm thinking I might do is replace it with this. This is a model RC motor. It has a rating, you're not going to believe this, a rating of 3,000 watts. That's about 4 horsepower. And as you can probably tell if you look very closely, it's a little bit smaller than the Alternator motor, and I can tell you it's a lot lighter. I'm thinking that a couple of these with small narrow belts on them can drive down onto this large pulley and ultimately replace the Alternator with a much faster solution. So instead of just 12 miles an hour, I can zip along at about 93 times the speed of sound. Which might mess my hair up, I have to admit, at that kind of speed. I've recently grafted this 14-tooth sprocket or pulley onto here. It's a blurry motor. I know it was focused when I bought it. Anyway, 14-tooth sprocket or pulley to replace this one that I made with my CNC machine. And what I've been doing is I've been testing it with this little pulley, also lovingly handmade by my CNC machine. This has got 56 tooths around the outside and a 14 tooth here, in order to become something like a compound reduction pulley. It fits with this M5 belt very nicely, and when I connect it up to that motor, the motor spins this little white pulley at quite some speed with plenty of torque. So what I'm thinking I'd like to do is perhaps make a bigger one of these to go there, and a really big one to go there, replacing the chain. That way I've got 2 belts instead of 1 belt and 1 chain, and I think that will get round the problem of chain fallage offage. Plus also it will be even quieter to run. So imagine this, instead of just 56 teeth, something like 300 teeth. So you end up with a big sprocket that comes out most of the way towards the edge of the wheel. It wouldn't have to be a solid sprocket, it could be spoked, sort of like this sprocket is, or this pulley being that sprocket. So it could be on a set of spokes like that is, so as to make it nice and light. But I think in the near future, as I develop this a little bit better or a little bit further, that's the kind of direction I think I'll be wanting to take. Is I like to see if I can get this sort of thing up to 30 miles an hour. We'll see. But in the meantime, I'll settle for 12 miles an hour for the prototype. As the next thing I want to do is put another battery on top of this and put a bigger field driver battery there and go for larger distances at my sedate 12 miles an hour. I'd like to think that a moderate sized battery can go for 5 miles or something like that. Oh yes, also part of the development will include using this space here in the frame. Imagine that, full of batteries, lithium ion perhaps, instead of lithium polymer. I could end up with a much faster, more streamlined design, whereby I remove all of this and sort of hide it away in there, along with a big battery. So the bike ends up with a range of, say, 30 miles at 30 miles an hour sort of thing. Then I think when I get to that point, it's actually starting to become practical. But hey, I can't complain. That was my first drive of an electricity bike, and wow, it worked. It worked like a charm. So I do believe I've got every reason to be happy. Okie dokie, my good friends, out there in Woodgasser world, have yourselves a fine and or dainty day, as the case may be. Ciao for now.